This looks like another Confessions podcast. Thank you for downloading another audio array of terrible tales from the very sinful Radio 2 listener. Lots of listeners, many sins. Everyone needs forgiveness from the Caring Collective. This week's concise collection features a battered bawling bird, a flying feral fling, an extraordinary electrical emergency, no, it doesn't work really, and some startlingly stinky Stilton. I like that. Dear Simon and the Compassionate Quorum, I wish to confess to an incident that happened but a few short weeks ago. The incident in question occurred during our annual family camping trip. We try and go somewhere new each year, and this time it was to the Gower Peninsula, which ended up... This is just where you've been, Matt, isn't it?
It is.
Well, yes, almost. Yeah.
Didn't quite get there.
Didn't quite get there. No.
Was there anything in your holiday in which it might feature with Tim's confession?
I don't think it will, because I don't think we got to where they got to.
Okay. And this time it was the Gower Peninsula, which ended up hosting me, my wife, and my 2 children for what we hoped would be a relaxing diversion from the pressures of modern life. The campsite was everything we wanted. Wide pitches, neatly separated by hedges, good camp amenities, and only 10 minutes from the local beach. Even more importantly, the campsite was as quiet as promised, so that we could all get a well-deserved sleep. Well, most nights, as it turned out. After a week of being worn out from the strenuous activity of being on holiday, it is tiring. It is. And admittedly quaffing the celebratory bottle of wine most nights, we settled down again for our slumbers and quickly fell asleep. This was until 5 a.m, when my wife and I were both woken by an awful racket emanating from just above our tent. Being a keen birdwatcher, I quickly recognised the familiar call of the wood pigeon. This particular bird had decided to position itself on a low branch overhanging our tent, from which it proceeded to loudly announce its availability to any lady wood pigeon that might be in the vicinity.
Lovely.
And then he says, cue recording from BBC Archives of wood pigeon's mating call or suitable impression from Simon. Which would you rather have? Well, this is the worst sound in nature.
It is horrible.
Sorry, which one's the wood pigeon? The blurb one?
The one nearest the microphone.
The irritating one.
Right, because there's 2 sounds there.
Yeah.
The blurb one.
That one.
What is this? Tweet of the day.
Okay. Yes.
That's what this
Very
is.
good.
Now, although I appreciate, continues Tim, I appreciate most things of a feathered variety, it has to be said that the wood pigeon call is one of nature's most annoying and least melodious.
Hear, hear.
In this particular case, there was a rival wood pigeon not far off, which was causing our pigeon to throw itself into even greater exertions to emphasise its attractiveness. It's all go on the Gower. That's what's happening. For a while, my wife and I buried our heads in our sleeping bags, trying to ignore it, but after 10 minutes, my wife's resistance finally broke. "That's enough," she said, and crawled out from her sleeping bag to confront our unwanted pest.
Ooh.
There then followed a number of shoo and get away noises, which I could clearly tell were having no effect on our avian overlord. Because he was still
Go away!
After about 5 minutes, my wife came back in and asked if I could have a go. So reluctantly, I dragged myself from my cosy bed and crawled outside. There, sitting just outside of arm's reach, was the insidious fowl, staring at me with the kind of innocence that you can only really achieve when you have a brain the size of a peanut. I too attempted to get rid of it by shooing it away, but it just looked down at me blankly.
Clap your hands.
It was just as I'd resorted to flinging small sticks at it that my wife appeared, clutching a large loaf of stale bread. It had grown hard as it lay behind my suitcase. Been reserved for tuna sandwiches, but we'd forgotten all about it. "Here, try this," she said, planting the rock-like crust in my hand. I gauged its weight and lobbed it at our feathered target. Well, Father Simon, I have to say I'm no Jonty Rhodes using an outdated cricketing reference here, but anyway, when it comes to throwing, but this time the missile flew true and traced a beautiful arc straight towards the bird. At some point between the bread's delivery and its arrival, the pigeon's survival instincts kicked in, and it finally took the hint, realised it wasn't wanted, and flew off. But it's here that I have to make my confession. Not to the pigeon, because, to be honest, it was a right pest and deserved everything that it got. No, what I had forgotten is that in my desire to rid ourselves of our troublesome interloper is that things that go up have to come down. And so it was that the stale loaf of bread, following Newton's universal law of motion, proceeded to continue on its downward side of the arc. It was then followed by a large crack as it impacted on a caravan roof, situated, unbeknownst to us, on the other side of the hedge. It hit once, then rolled noisily down the length of the van. Now, I have to beg forgiveness, firstly, for waking up what turned out to be Belgian nuns.
What? Oh, outstanding. Well
Who were staying in the van. This is 5 o'clock in the morning, by lobbing masonry at their caravan. I'm not sure if the blessings that came our way were in Flemish, Walloon or French, but whatever, it was very impressive. I do have to beg forgiveness. What are they doing on holiday? I must ask forgiveness for the reaction of me and my wife after hearing the rock hit their roof, because this consisted of a Pinteresque moment of silence as my wife and I looked at each other, followed by a mad dash back into our tent and a lot of juvenile giggling and shushing noises rather than going round to check for damage and apologise to the nuns. I was later sent round on a reconnaissance mission to find out if there was any damage, and fortunately there didn't appear to be any. I did find that our saintly European neighbours had quickly packed up their van and left, so I need to ask their forgiveness if we in any way caused them to hasten their departure with the idea that people in the UK routinely go lobbing bread at caravans in the early hours of the morning. Certainly not in this part of town, says Tim. Anyway, who'd have thought that the wood pigeon a-cha-cha-cha story could have ended up so bizarrely? Let's see what part-time Pauline makes of all that.
Well, I don't think that the phrase relaxing and camping should ever be used, because it's just never that way, is it? I've only been camping once, hated it, never ever going to do it again. Awful activity, not relaxing, not ever. No. So from that point of view, you kind of deserve everything you get. On the other hand...
Well, all campers just deserve it because they're camping.
Yeah.
Brave move.
On the other hand, not deserve it, but you have to take what comes, don't you? You've chosen to go camping. I too am plagued by wood pigeons.
Yeah, me too.
Come the dawn out in countryside. It's blooming awful.
Vile creatures.
I lie there awake at dawn thinking, if I had a shotgun. So, from that point of view...
Have you thought of a loaf of bread?
They're huge, and the racket they make. And now that it's frisky season, it's worse.
Yes.
So, yes, definitely
Is it now frisky season for the wood pigeons? Is it?
Yeah.
We know about the
They're always
supermoon.
frisky.
This has been underreported.
Well, I'm
they
telling
do back
you.
off later in the year, don't they?
I think Tim gets credit for using the phrase Pinteresque moment of silence, because that hasn't turned up before. Anyway, what do you have there, Deadly? What do you
Wide
think?
pitches, that was the other thing I made a note about. There are always wide pitches on this campsite. The chances are the whole campsite would have been annoyed anyway, so I think I'm in the mood for forgiving, because it's good to see you guys back. And also, nuns are usually up at about 5 o'clock in the morning, aren't they? They're doing sort of praying anyway.
Interesting point,
For
Matty.
prime, I think, at 5.
Exactly, so they'll have been up for
Prime,
ages. And you didn't do any damage to the caravan itself anyway. So, and because it was the other side of the hedge, no one would have known where the loaf came from.
That's
so
true.
I think you're forgiven. And good to see you back, guys.
Yes,
Welcome back.
Brother Matthew, what do you think about
At the
throwing
risk of
bread at Belgian nuns?
Belgian nuns. Apparently that's okay. At the risk of sounding like I'm writing a letter to the Daily Telegraph, am I alone in thinking that really the wood pigeon sound isn't that bad? I don't think I've heard that. That sounds rather soothing. I rather like the sound of the wood pigeon.
There's close to you, first thing in the morning.
No problem with that.
At dawn.
No problem with that. And actually, do you know what? The wood pigeon is doing what it's there to do. You camping in the field was not what you were supposed to be doing. So the wood pigeon was there before you. It'll be there after you. And for that reason, I am not going to forgive. Apart from the bit with the Belgian nuns. Well done.
Anyway, it's Trevor who sends in tonight's confession. Thank you, Trevor. Dear Father Simon, a very good friend of ours holds an annual birthday barbecue where a bunch of now ageing university friends take the opportunity to relive our glory days, some 20 years ago now, being students at Aston University. Roger's barbecues are something of a legend, and friends come from far and wide to enjoy the usual smoky sausages and burgers, plenty of liquid refreshment and a good laugh, not to mention Roger's huge English breakfast for those of us who choose to stop over. As well as the usual faces, there are usually a few newcomers, Roger's colleagues and neighbours who hang around long enough to be polite and then wander off quietly to let us reminisce, or perhaps to take refuge from the regulars' growing number of offspring. Now, Roger and Lucy's house, you need to know, is set back a bit from a quiet village street. The barbecue is in the small but beautiful back garden with apple trees and a small patio by the back door, where several cats wander to and fro through the cat flap. Lucy likes her cats, you need to know. Also,
Any wood pigeons at all?
There's no wood pigeons, I'm afraid.
Good.
No, we have moved on.
Good.
From that. And I haven't got it selected either. So. Otherwise,
You were tempted, though.
it would be in like a shot.
You were tempted.
On Sunday morning, suffering from an inexplicably sore head, how did that happen? And a huge thirst, I made my way through the tangle of bodies in sleeping bags for a glass of water and some fresh air. The bright sunshine tempted me into the once pretty garden, now tragically trashed by dozens of empty tins, wine bottles, paper plates, cups, and unfinished diesel, a favourite drink at university, comprising of cider, lager, and blackcurrant. Oh. Which sounds like a waste of cider, a waste of lager, and a waste of blackcurrant, but that's students for you.
Just writing the recipe down.
Thanks, Grandad.
Thanks, Grandad. Yeah.
Being a good soul, I gathered much of this up into the overflowing wheelie bin, while from inside the house the smell of bacon indicated that Roger was also awake and preparing breakfast. I felt I deserved a halo by the time Roger called out that breakfast was ready and was about to open the back door when I noticed another unwelcome addition to the garden, right by the door. A brown rat.
Oh, no.
A real beast. 6 or 7 inches long, quite dead, and clearly left by one of the cats I think I mentioned earlier. Now, at this point, I was faced with a moral dilemma. Embarrass our hosts by pointing out their cat's misdemeanour and a likely rodent infestation, or somehow quickly dispose of the rat myself. I decided on strategic removal. But where? The bin was already overflowing, breakfast was on the table, so I had to be quick, and then a simple solution occurred to me.
Oh, no.
I figured if the rat was simply lying in the street, it would be mistaken for roadkill. Brilliant, I thought. Gripping the tail, I picked it up slowly.
Stop it.
Rigor mortis had set in.
A stiff rat.
It was pretty solid. Weighed the same, I would say, as a small bag of sugar. I swung it briefly.
What? Swung it?
It's an interesting comparison.
I took a huge swing. It was a bit like doing a mini hammer throw, and I launched the rat in a pleasing parabola down the side of the house along the drive.
Down the side of the house. He's not even near the road.
There were a few brief moments.
Pleasing parabola.
It was only at this point I recognised Roger's neighbour. Sunday papers tucked under his arm, enjoying a peaceful morning stroll, straw hat on his head. Strolling along the intervening pavement, there were a few brief moments as rat headed towards head, and I knew exactly what was going to happen, but I was powerless to stop. The rat hit him headband first, knocking the hat clean off his head. Rat and hat tumbled into the street. Hat rolled, the rat less so. The man stopped instantly, as did the rat. I imagine his shock quite apparent. I can't explain all the thoughts that went through my mind or his at that instant, but in the time it probably took him to figure out and say, I wonder what on earth that was. I'd already dismissed the idea of trying to explain and ducked into the back door before he saw me, pretending nothing had happened as I tucked into breakfast. At least he wasn't a Belgian nun.
Very good.
There's a recurring theme of chucking things at the moment.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to be a season, though. I don't think we can get away with too many.
Oh, come on.
So I'm seeking forgiveness, firstly for disturbing the innocent neighbour's Sunday morning stroll in such a shocking manner, and then not explaining immediately to him why he was the subject of an airborne rodent attack. He probably wonders to this day how he offended his neighbours to the extent that they'd invite him to a barbecue one day and then throw a deceased rat at him the next. Vermin needs to be treated, of course, but not thrown at Roger. Secondly, I seek forgiveness from my hosts, as I never had the guts to warn them why their neighbour might be a little upset the next time they met. Anyway, chucking rats about, I don't think we've had many rat-based confessions. But anyway, Roger got certainly a surprising Sunday morning stroll. What do we think then of Trevor's confession? Is first of all, very prim, Sister Pauline.
Well, I quite admire the initiative to get up and start cleaning up the garden. I've done that myself many a morning when everybody else is fast asleep, and our garden looks like the one just described, actually, in that confession. So, well done him.
Have you been drinking diesel?
Not that I can remember, so no. So that's big plus for him. But I can only assume he was somewhat addled by the hangover if he thought that chucking a rat right down with the whole side of the garden and hope it would end up looking like roadkill was a smart move. No, not forgiven.
He was pleasingly motivated.
He was well motivated.
I mean, it was all the right reasons, but I can't forgive, I don't think, really. There must have been a better way to dispose of that rat than that.
Can you imagine a rat hitting you in the face on a Sunday morning?
Well, it was the hat, wasn't it? It was the hat.
But the hat was on the head.
Yeah.
In the head.
But it was just, a little bit unfair. I can't forgive for that.
It was a big rat, huge.
Almost as bad as a wood pigeon, there. No, I can't forgive, I don't think. And the host, it's too late now anyway to tell the host, isn't it? So I shouldn't worry about the host, but it's the neighbour. You should have confessed at the time. I can't forgive
it. It would shake you up of a morning.
It would be. Where did that come from, you'd say, wouldn't you?
Yes, you would. Yeah, you would.
Maybe it being a Sunday morning,
While
someone is
freaking out.
trying to tell me something.
Yes, by throwing rats at my head.
Yes, no.
I'm not going to feel too sorry for the rat. Circle of life, there it is, you know.
Nobody's asking about the rat.
And there you are, at the
rat
bottom
was
of the
dead
garden.
throughout.
But I would say it is an odd way to deal with deceased animals, to throw them in the street. What I can't understand is he's clearing up. He's got his thoughts about the family and saying they don't want to see this rat. But why doesn't he just place the rat in the street as opposed to chucking it places? I would say
That's just a
that
quick way
he's
of doing
not
it.
as altruistic as he's making out, and is in fact, I think he was actually aiming at the neighbour. That's what I'm going to say. I think he was actually aiming at the neighbour with the hat. I'm going to see if I can knock his hat off with this rat, and I did, and I like to boast about it on
That's
national
quite a good
radio.
shot, then.
So
Good
it is a
game,
very
good
good
game.
shot, and for that I am not going to forgive.
All right.
Throwing rats
Can't
at the neighbour.
condone hitting people on the head with a rat.
Do you forgive
We've said
Trevor?
no. We've said no. haven't we?
I think it's a complete.
Unusual.
It
but we've
is.
said no.
It's a clean sweep of no. Rico sends in tonight's confession. Thank you very
Rico.
much indeed. Dear Simon and the Collective, I need to confess to a very, very bad deed that only took place a couple of months ago. Since then, I've been racked with guilt. And have
Rico racked.
Yes.
Okay.
And that tabloid instinct never far away. Desperately been trying to find a way to tell my wife that everything was in fact me. So this is a live confession.
Wow.
Let me set the scene. My wife was in the final year of her degree. No idea what the subject was.
Good. This is starting
She
well.
hadn't.
He says, I think I should start by asking for forgiveness on that one.
Yes.
How can she be in the third year and you not actually know what she's studying? Anyway, we continue. She was in full flow writing her 10,000-word dissertation. She was stressed out and under a lot of pressure, especially as the deadline was looming. It was a very tense time in our house. So did the evening in question. It's like any other. My wife was upstairs, cracking on, fingers burning on the keyboard, and I was wrestling with our 3 children, trying to put them to bed, but having very, very little success. It was whilst I was giving them all the 3-second count, do that, you got 3 seconds, that I heard a bang in the kitchen. The kind of crack you get when a fuse goes. I ditched my bedtime routine attempt, halting the countdown on 1 9/5. Hilarious. And ran to investigate. The kids love that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And I ran to investigate the fuse board. Now, I'm not an electrical expert, but after my thorough examination of the fuse board, I decided everything appeared normal. No fuses were blown, everything looked in place. But for some reason, and to this day, I have no idea what went through my head.
I know what's coming.
I flicked the fuse labelled upstairs sockets. I instantly heard a terrifying, gut-wrenching scream and shout started to come from the office in the loft, including some very rude words indeed. Words our children keep on asking me what they mean. I still say I don't know. And then it dawned on me, I had actually turned off my wife's laptop.
No.
At the point that she had, I discovered later, written 9,000 words of her final year dissertation, and she'd just lost all the work she'd been doing that day. With my electrical know-how and determination to get out of trouble, quickly thinking on my feet, I turned off the whole fuse board, sinking the house into terrifying darkness, and I shouted, "Power cuts, all right, no one panic.
Don't worry about it.
Everything's fine. It's just a trip fuse. Leave it with me. I've got a torch here. I'm going to fix it. Everyone carry on. Just stay where you are, kids." Anyway, so the house was dark. How long should I leave it? That was the question. How long should I leave it dark? The kids were quiet. Absolutely no one move. That might have been it. My wife had started yelling again. I still waited. Then I heard her start to feel her way downstairs. I waited a few moments longer, counted to 3, and then flicked the fuse board back on. By now, my wife was hurtling downstairs, wanting to know what was going on and to complain that she'd just lost everything, and she was now going to have to spend the entire night rewriting all the words that she'd written that day. They were lost, and she had no time, and she wasn't going to cope, and she was very stressed. I helpfully said, "Did you back it up?" "No, I jolly well didn't," she replied, forcefully. "Why is it," as she said, looking out at the street, "why is it only our house has had a power cut? The street lights are on, our neighbours' lights are on. What's going on?" I shrugged. "It'll be our new supplier," I said. "I told you they were useless."
He put
Anyway.
it on. He put it back on by this point, though, hadn't he?
Yeah, but why did it go out?
Yeah.
Pay attention then.
Simple
No.
point there,
Well,
don't
no.
think?
He came down the stairs.
Yeah.
She came
But
down the
they
stairs.
might not have done
looked
it as quick-
outside.
Yeah. No,
You
you're
with me
right.
on this?
Yeah,
Can I finish
The
this?
sequence is wrong.
Simon, I seek forgiveness. I need forgiveness from my wife for causing her undue extra stress and work. I should really have owned up there and then to my mistake and the fact she lost all those words. I must also ask forgiveness from my children for the rest of the night. I put on an act of being very angry, both with the electricity board, because of course they still exist, and generally giving them a hard time because of my mood. I even pretended to call the electricity company and left a very, very cross message. For the record, my wife did get her lost work redone, but it did take her many days, and eventually she passed with flying colours, though no thanks to me. Yours, a very sorry husband and dad. So this is a live confession, okay? Until this moment, Rico's wife thought it was a genuine power cut, and she had a lot of work and she had a lot of stress and she didn't really want to do it, but actually it was old smarty pants that you're married to who just thought, I know, why don't I just switch it off? Because that's always hilarious. And to get out of trouble, switch the whole house into darkness, because he was a bloke and he could sort it out very nicely. Thank you very much indeed, sister part-time.
I don't think her degree was in logic, wasn't it? Because she would have seen through that pathetic excuse for an excuse quite quickly, yes.
I don't think, how would she know? Because if you switch the whole thing off and then switch it all back on again by the time she comes down.
But clearly her laptop went and then the lights went out. I don't think power cuts normally go in phases.
Sequence.
Well, they can do. Oh, you never know.
Well, I do know. I know they don't. They just
they could,
go out.
but they could do. Depends how the house is wired. The attic might have been wired in series and not in parallel.
Absolutely. Well,
Good knowledge.
No,
Good knowledge.
not buying that.
oh, right. Fine. Okay.
Because I think you just made that up. I do not forgive him actually, because that's just a typical bloke thing, isn't it? Nothing seems to be wrong, so I'll just flick this to see what happens, because I'm down here with the fuse box anyway. Although I do admire the excessive things he went to
Just
to
turn
try
the
and
whole thing
confirm
off.
his big fat lie.
Here's the Dean.
I don't know whether I forgive either, really, because not all of this adds up in this story, I have to say.
What doesn't add up?
Well, the fact that when she came down the stairs and said...
around this. It's because she says why the other one's not
because
off.
by then he'd
Because-
switched the power back
yes,
on.
but they
So
wouldn't have been
therefore-
able to do it as quickly as him. That's her point.
No, I don't buy that at all. And also, what she should have done is had autosave on, which she could have.
Right, so it was kind of her fault.
So, well, it
In
wasn't
a
her
way.
fault. She could have had a power cut at any time. I mean, they happen. I get lots of them where I live.
Brother Matthew.
Must be great going to the cinema with Deadly. Well, that wouldn't happen.
wouldn't have happened.
That wouldn't happen, and neither would that. How can someone go back to the future? That doesn't even work.
Pauline and I think of the same
Yes.
here. We think the
Okay.
same. Mr. Logic.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna back Rico on this, because I love the fact that he turned himself into the hero. In this, it was always all his
From a
fault.
disaster.
All his fault. He said, "Don't worry, everyone. I am the man of the house, and I'm going to sort everything out. Everyone else, stay where you are." I love that. And also, she should have had autosave on a computer. Should have backed it up. So in effect, it was his wife's fault. So for that reason, I think every rational person will say forgiven.
Well, shall we find out? Let's find out. Hey, rational people. Do you forgive Rico? Here's the text 88291. It's the people's verdict that is needed, and your computer and power cut based confessions. Confessions at bbc.co.uk. Tonight's drive time confession, the collective are here and assembled. And tonight's tale comes from Mandy. Thank you, Mandy, for this. This is an interesting one. Many, many years ago, so I became a student nurse, along with 14 other keen and eager students. Very excitedly, we moved into our single rooms, which were in a large 2-storey block with communal bathroom, kitchen and lounge facilities. The majority of our group were homed along a long corridor with our rooms on either side. The facilities in the house were all communal and shared between 14 of us. As you can imagine, these shared facilities would not have passed any known environmental standards, but despite this, we all kept our own rooms clean and tidy. It soon became clear, however, that one of our group, who I shall call Sally, did not have the same hygiene standards as the rest of us and was a little, shall we say, grubby.
Have we cleaned that up?
No, actually, grubby was the original one. We've got a higher education themed confession. You see, this is all very carefully placed.
Not
together.
done a Thursday before, you see.
That's true. It's always better on a Thursday.
That's great, thanks.
It was not uncommon in Sally's room for 1 or 2 plates of leftover food to be found under her bed, with mould and dust developing nicely, or old empty cartons of noodles. It's also a foodie Thursday, so we've doubled up on this. This particular student only cleaned a cup when she wanted a drink, as opposed to cleaning a drink after drinking it. Now, it may be a recognised fact, which I didn't know, that nurses tend to have smelly feet. This is due to us having to wear rubber-soled, sensible shoes. At the end of a hard day, there was nothing better than to take off your shoes and stockings. Deadly always thinks that.
Yes, exactly.
And put your feet up. And leave your shoes in the corridor outside your bedroom. Now, at the end of an evening, if you looked along any nursing corridor, there'd be a pair of shoes outside each door.
Lovely.
Now, Sally would also leave her shoes in the corridor, but for whatever reason, they were far more offensive than the rest of the shoes put together. Visitors to our rooms would often complain about the terrible stink as they walked along the corridor. We soon all complained and asked her to find somewhere else to put her shoes, either in her bedroom, in a cupboard, or on a windowsill for a good airing. So, good-naturedly, Sally kept her shoes on her bedroom windowsill. As you can imagine, Sally's room was not always the most pleasant place to sit and have a coffee. After one Christmas break, I returned to our student house with a large, very ripe hunk of Stilton cheese. Grandad's vein cheese, as it's referred to. It had become forgotten amid all the other foods we devoured that Christmas, so I drove back with the car windows open so that the smell did not overpower me during my 4-hour drive. When I arrived back at the student accommodation, I put the cheese into the communal fridge rather than in my own small fridge, as it was rather smelly. I then promptly forgot about it. Now here's the sentence. This cheese stayed in the fridge for more than a year. Uneaten and unloved. One day, many months later, the house warden informed us that as the communal fridge hadn't been working for a while, we were going to get a new one, so we needed to empty everything out. So with a large black plastic bag and rubber gloves, we emptied out old tins of rank tuna, wrinkly tomatoes, furry baked beans and chunky stale milk. Could be a standard student accommodation. Yeah. At the back was a plastic bag with a liquidy green and blue lumpy molten mass of old Stilton. For some reason I should have warned you actually at some stage that this isn't particularly tea
we were about
friendly.
to eat.
For some reason I cannot... It's mackerel. For some reason I cannot fathom, I opened this bag and sniffed. Now, being a nurse, I can handle most odours. However, this nearly killed me. Instead of being a good student nurse and putting it in the rubbish bag, I suddenly thought it would be a great joke to leave it in Sally's room. And I wondered how long it would take her to find out. So when the coast was clear, I sneaked in with a plastic bag and I put it under a bed behind a suitcase. And I waited. Well, it took quite a few weeks for my friend to actually realise that the bad smell from her room was worse than normal. Her shoes had been on the windowsill every day, but now she'd started to clean the dirty plates and cups that were stashed around her room. But the smell lingered and seemed to be getting worse. One day, Sally had a mega clean-up, so we all offered to help, as that's what friends do. We emptied her wardrobe, all the shelves beside the cabinet. We cleared the suitcases from under a bed and pulled the bed away from the walls. I made sure that I was on the other side of the room when, lo and behold, someone said the smell seemed to be much worse in the corner where the bed had been. Sally looked down and found an old leaky plastic bag.
Oh, no.
As she picked it up and sniffed it, the old bag rent asunder. That's the cheese. That's the cheese, not Sally.
Yes.
And mouldy, rotten, stinky old cheese ran like lava over her hands, her jeans and the carpet.
You've gone very quiet, Paul.
To the sound of retching and held noses, Sally scraped and through, scraped and through, scraped and through. Nobody ever doubted that this was not one of Sally's mouldy meals. No one thought it was me. And to this day I've never owned up to my sin with the Stilton. However, after that, Sally's room became the coffee room as she kept the cleanest room on the block. Could I have your forgiveness, please, for playing such a dirty trick on a well-loved friend? In my defence, it did help her to see the error of her grubby ways and has made her a cleaner, more hygienic person as a result. So that's the excuse there at the end. 2 grubbies, I quite like that. Stinky old cheese and an old bag rent asunder. What do you think of that, Sister Rebecca?
We'll have to get her on the phone and ask her.
I do beg your pardon.
in shock, Paul.
It's
In
just second nature. Sister part-time.
I am actually almost rendered speechless with horror.
Yeah.
I'm quite nasally
You went pale, you went
sensitive.
pale.
I do. I can't stand very, very strong, revolting odours.
Don't do that.
And it just grosses me out even to think about this. Mandy, get off your high horse. What an awful thing to do to someone. Absolutely vile and horrible and absolutely not ever forgiven. You sound like a right nasty piece of work.
The cheese stayed in the fridge for more than a year. Can you imagine? It was stinky in the first place. Yes, deadly.
I think the fact that it was liquefied at this point it was the frightening thing. That was when it came out of the fridge. No, I think it's far too harsh a treatment for poor Sally, really, and possibly dangerous given what the cheese may have become over time.
What might it have?
Well, he could have been horrible, couldn't he? It could have been some sort of beast. An animal could have grown out of
The
that. It's just awful.
Listeria monster.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
right. He could have become a beast.
So he could have done. You should have confessed earlier to Sally.
Shouldn't have done it. That's what should have done.
Well, a little bit of that. But when you said weeks, when it had been in the room weeks,
Yes.
that was the turning point.
Grubby
for
old
me.
Sally, that's what they're thinking.
Yeah, you were trying to make a point, but when it had gone on for weeks, that for me was the turning point.
Sister Matthew there.
Yes, this it reminds me of sort of a cheese version of Carrie. This really, isn't it? We're gonna pick on the girl that we don't like, and we're gonna leave some cheese in her room, and then it's going to explode all over her. And then Mandy with her delicate nasal passages who can't deal with a smell of natural feet and cheese in her car. And how come the cheese is in the fridge for a year and no one notices? That's because the other people on that floor had no idea what they were doing and all picking on the little girl who just happened to be a bit grubby. And it's all coming back and biting you right now, Mandy. Both barrels in your direction. I'm saying not forgiven.
Very good. Is that double barrel? That's double barrel.
Double barreled in your direction.
Well, they were this week's tales. Who did you forgive? And if that's provoked a thought about the thing that you've been meaning to confess for quite a while. It's confessions@bbc.co.uk. More in a week. The Weekly Mayo is available to download now and every Friday. Thank you.